Thanks. Okay, guten Tag, good morning. I see once again we have an Icelandic-sized podium for me. I will bring my own footstool one of these days. Okay, for those of you whom I haven't met and are asking yourselves, who the hell is this guy? I am a serial entrepreneur, but I've also been a professional investor for about a dozen years. I am the co-founder and CFO of Verne Global, the data center business out in Reykjanesbær. But I am also, before that, I was a principal with General Catalyst Partners, whom many of you may know. It's a big Boston and Silicon Valley-based venture firm. And while I was there in 2006, I co-led our investment in CCP Games. And I've been an alternate director on the CCP board ever since then. More recently, I made an angel investment in an exciting new VR startup here called Solvar, who I'm sure many of you know, and looking forward to working with those guys. But importantly, I've raised probably, I don't know, a couple $100 million, a little bit more for my various companies and portfolio companies along the way, from angels, from venture investors, private equity investors. So I've been through the fundraising range, and I spend a lot of time here in Iceland. I think I'm coming up on my 200th trip to Iceland, and whereas most Americans spend their summers in places like Cape Cod or the Hamptons, the Kato family strangely elects to spend its summers here in Iceland. And we're coming up on our 8th summer in Iceland, despite the lovely weather. So I really like it here. So it's an honor to be here today. And when Hilmar and Salome and the organizers of Slush were kind enough to invite me to come speak, they suggested that I call my speech "Transform Your Relationship with Investors." And that is actually a very good name for the speech, because I'm going to largely talk about how to do that. But I said, well, could we do something a little more engaging, a little more thought-provoking, maybe something with a little more edge? And so the official name for this presentation is actually, "What do VCs, luggage, and venereal diseases have in common?" Okay. Now, you're probably thinking, okay, this guy's going to spend the next 15 minutes slamming on venture capitalists, and that is actually not going to be the case at all. I know many, many VCs. Many of them are good friends of mine. I was one. By and large, they are a very intelligent, hardworking, thoughtful group of people who want the entrepreneurial teams they back to succeed. Yes, there is the occasional evil VC, but I've met plenty of evil entrepreneurs just as well. And I think they're no more evil in VC land than there is anywhere else in society. But I think because they're these sort of rich, mysterious, powerful people, they get a bad rap. We tend to think anyone who's rich, mysterious, and powerful is probably up to no good. But that's not necessarily the case. Anyone care to guess what VCs, luggage, and venereal diseases have in common? Any guesses? No, it wasn't that hard to buy my last Samsung. Okay. What they have in common is, once you have one, it is incredibly difficult to get rid of it. Okay. So the point is, you should spend a lot of time figuring out how to get the right VC and have a plan for how you're going to manage your relationship with that VC. By the way, there are obviously lots and lots of investment options today: angels, VCs, crowdfunding, later stage venture capital, private equity. I'm going to use the term VC loosely today, and everyone's different. Everyone has a different point of view of the world, but anyway. While I don't think VCs are inherently evil, I do think that there are an unfortunate number of broken venture capital and entrepreneurial relationships. And there are lots of reasons for why that happens. Sometimes it's just bad luck. But one of them is that there is this fundamental informational asymmetry between investors and entrepreneurs. Okay? Think about it this way. VCs are professional investors. They see a lot of different companies. They spend their lives trying to figure out how to more effectively invest in startups, and they have a lot of experience. On the other hand, most entrepreneurs, particularly first-timers or people who haven't done it very much, know very, very little about the fundraising process and don't have a lot of information about how to go about doing that correctly. And even if the VC is well-intended, a lot of power comes with that knowledge that they have, and they are capitalists. They are in this to make money, and they will certainly maximize the advantage they have with their information, with the information that they have. And so my hope today is to give you guys some tools or some frameworks to think about how to level the playing field a little bit and build your own informational advantage. Because I think it's actually good for everybody, both investors and entrepreneurs, when you know what you're dealing with. So my first piece of advice is to do your due diligence, okay? I'm always dismayed at how little due diligence entrepreneurs do on the prospective investors that they're talking to. And it kind of makes sense. I mean, look, you're desperate for cash. Maybe you don't even have a choice. So you say, okay, I'm going to take the money and I'll sort out the consequences later. We'll figure it out later. But I really don't recommend that you do that because, again, that VC is going to be with you for a long time. I mean, think about the other important long-term relationships you have in your life, your partner, your spouse, key employees. You hopefully spend a lot of time and effort to try to figure out if that person is the right person to bring into that function. Why would you not do the same with an investor? Frankly, it's much easier to get rid of a girlfriend or a boyfriend than it is to get rid of a venture capitalist. They are contractually bound to you and your company, whether you like it or not. So, and they're certainly going to do their due diligence on you. They're going to turn up every rock. They're going to they're going to try to find all the skeletons about you. You should do the same and make sure that you're picking the right person. So what are some of the right questions to ask? Well, there are a lot of them, but a few of the more important and obvious ones are, David Gardner already touched on this, but make sure they're good people. Find somebody you like and respect. You are going to spend a lot of time with your investor, board meetings, dinners, phone calls, company retreats. They're going to likely be with you for years. So make sure you find someone you actually enjoy spending time with. Closely related to that is you really want, it's easy to be a buddy and a great VC when everything's going great. Hey, you're doing great. Keep up. Keep at it. That's fantastic. But what you really want to know is how is your VC going to react when the shit hits the fan? Okay, and these days it is so easy compared to 10 years ago to do off-list reference checking, okay, with LinkedIn and all the social media. It's so easy to find who's worked with whom. And you want to find an entrepreneur who was backed by the VC in question who failed. And you want to ask them, so when your company failed or went through a tough spot, how did the VC act? Was she supportive? Did he give you time to work things out? Did they back you up? Even if you ultimately failed for whatever reason, were they reasonable in that process? And if you hear that, that's a great sign. But if you hear otherwise, you should be concerned. So look, when you're in that foxhole and the bullets are flying at you, is your VC back to back with you firing out as fast as he can, or is he thinking about throwing a grenade at you? Okay, you want the former, not the latter. You should definitely dig into firm dynamics, okay? Every VC firm is different, and you not only want to know about the firm, but the role of the individual investor in that firm, okay? So you don't want to take money from a firm that's running out of money or is struggling, because if the firm doesn't have money to continue to play in your subsequent rounds, it creates all sorts of perverse incentives that are going to create misalignment with what you want to do. But you also want to know that the person making the investment has the power and the influence within their firm to get their own agenda through. I mean, VC firms tend to be loose confederations of individual contributors, but there's usually some level of consensual decision making. And it usually comes around things that are very important to you, like follow-on rounds and exits. You want to make sure that your agenda, your VCs, hopefully on your side, can get their agenda through the firm. So future rounds, you definitely want to talk with the VC about how does their firm deal with future rounds, because the current fundraising is only likely to be one of many, and you have to really think a bit strategically and further out about how that VC is going to deal with future rounds. Do they like to lead inside rounds and do it themselves? Do they like to partner? Who do they like to partner with? How are they going to think about funding in both good cases and bad cases going forward? And very closely related to that, how will they think about exits? This is one area where so often I see friction between VCs and entrepreneurs, where there isn't really a clear alignment of what the desired exit is. Everyone's going to have different views on this, both the entrepreneur and the VC. And are we in this for a 10x outcome, a 20x outcome, a 40x outcome? Would we sell the company early for 3x and consider it a win under the right circumstances? So you got to really think about that, and then you want to ask about what they're going to bring besides their money, and I'll talk more about that. The other conversation that you absolutely have to have with your investor before you take money from them is set clarity around what your role is going to be, what your team members' roles are going to be, both now and in the future. And again, this is where so many relationships go awry. And we all aspire to be Sergey Brin or Mark Zuckerberg and to be that iconic tech entrepreneur who goes from the very beginning of the company through the exit and beyond. But that is the exception to the vast norm. Very, very few great outcomes have a case where the founder is still the CEO at the time of exit. And there's nothing wrong with that whatsoever, because very few people have both the ability and the desire to scale with a company as it goes through all of its different growth phases. I mean, a lot of people say, look, I'm interested in the startup phase, but once it gets to 50 or 100 people, too much politics, too boring, too many meetings, whatever. I want out, or I want a different role at that point in time. There's nothing wrong with that, okay? But the point is to make sure that you have a clear expectation with your investor about what that's gonna be and what's gonna trigger a change if and when it happens. Okay, so you've got your venture capital money. What are you gonna do next? Well, I recommend that you put your investors to work. Too many people think, oh, I'm working for my investor. And of course that is true to a certain extent, but you put your investor to work for you, okay? A good investor is gonna bring a lot more than money. They're gonna bring Rolodexes with prospective hires, customers, partners, resources, and they will hopefully have a lot of great experience. One thing that a good VC will have is a breadth of data and experience, and they've seen what works and doesn't work in other circumstances. Ultimately, you make the decisions, you make the call, and you might say, well, that situation doesn't apply to me, but you'd sure like to hear what they think about that. And one forum that I see so often missed as a good place to put your VC to work is the board meetings. Okay? A bad board meeting is one where everybody shows up, the company presents the KPIs, they present the financials, they talk about where we are in the development cycle, what's good, what's bad, everybody nods, and they ask a couple questions, and they go away. Okay? What a waste of time. Right? You can do much of that in advance of the board meeting. A good board meeting is one where you have a rich, complicated strategic issue, and you make people do their homework in advance of the board meeting and come prepared to have a robust debate and make some decisions. Get your information out to your investors, and sorry, I'm conflating board and investor, but often early stage companies have an investor-heavy board. You get the data out, your analysis out, your initial recommendations, but as well as alternatives, and you frame the questions that you want to have a debate on in the board meeting a week or more in advance, and you say, go do your homework, come prepared. If you don't have an opinion, find someone who does and get smart about it. Okay? That's a good board meeting. Manage expectations. Okay, so inherently, most entrepreneurs are going to be very enthusiastic. You should be. We have to be. I mean, if you're going to do something as crazy as start a company, you need to be very passionate and optimistic. But you need to balance that with establishing credibility. Too often, I see entrepreneurs promoting their investors, promoting their board, saying everything's great, or just saying, hey, it's wonderful, it's wonderful, it's wonderful, and then inevitably you hit the speed bump, or you're going to hit multiple speed bumps, and you get thrown off the cart. Okay, manage their expectations and manage your credibility by presenting an ambitious but achievable plan, and then meet it or exceed it time after time after time. I think it's something we've done very well at Verne. We've gone through some extraordinarily tough times during the CREPA, but we managed our investors' expectations, and when we needed them to show up for us, we had the credibility to get them to support us. And I've seen, and every great company has an existential crisis, usually multiple times. Kayak, and they often have it late in the cycle. Kayak, a company that we started at GC, we seeded, it ultimately went public and sold for $2 billion. Kayak had a near-death experience years into its growth path. But again, those entrepreneurs had great credibility with the investors, and they were able to carry through. Couple quick things specific to this crowd, since I think this is mostly Icelandic game developer folks. Find an investor who actually knows about game development and is comfortable with it. Until 2003 or so, early 2000s, most VCs wouldn't touch game development because of the the hit risk associated with it. You make a game, if you get it out, you have a couple months at retail to sell your $30, $50 box, whatever, and then you're good or you're not. They didn't want to touch that. With online games emerged models like freemium, subscription, free-to-play, virtual goods, and all the variants thereof, and that's when it became venture-friendly, and that's when VCs dived in. But you still want to find someone who is comfortable with the artistic element of game development and understands that there is art that can't be extracted from the process of game development. Ideally, your VC is not investing you as their first game company. With Iceland, I would say, unless you plan to keep the company very small and like a niche studio, you must plan to scale outside of Iceland. And I have very, very firm opinions about this from a lot of direct personal experience. But sooner or later, you're going to run out of headroom. You just can't find enough great people in Iceland to grow your company big, and it's almost impossible in a timely fashion to bring great talent in from the outside. People love to come visit Iceland, but most of them don't want to move here and uproot their families. So think about how you're going to scale outside Iceland. They're great examples now of companies that have done it very well within this community. To wrap things up, remember that fundraising is a milestone or one of many milestones along the journey. And as you go out and you meet investors and you raise capital, I strongly encourage you to put some thought into who you're taking it from and how you're going to manage that relationship thereafter so that you don't wind up getting the VC equivalent of a venereal disease who you have to carry along with you for years and years and years and suffer through. Rather, get that great piece of luggage, okay? We all have that bag that we've had for 10 or 15 years that is reliable. It has always done a great job for us. It is always there, and we take it on all our journeys, and we love that bag. Find the great luggage equivalent of a VC and go out and do great things. Tack för det. Thank you for the time. Have a great conference.